Have you talked to Gabby's family?
No one's reached out to me, and I don't know if it's appropriate for me to reach out to them with everything going on.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. In this episode, we're going to deal with part 3 of the extended interview with Brian's sister, Cassie. And I did notice on the Banfield show that not everyone has been able to access the transcript. So I will put a link to the full extended transcript in the description. I've posted it onto Crime Rocket 2 so you can follow the whole thing there. Obviously the full raw video hasn't been released yet. We had a situation like that in the Chris Watts case and also in the Summer Wells case. One wonders whether we'll see the same thing in this case. But before we get to today's episode, if you haven't subscribed, please do. Like, share, leave a comment, and let's get started. So the extended interview is about 1,100 words, a little bit over that. And we're now going into the last section of that. And so the reporter from ABC7 asks, what did you think when you knew, like the YouTube videos and it looks like they're having a great time? And I guess it's a little bit of a garbled way of asking, how do you reconcile this horrible result with this appearance of things being, happy on social media? And Cassie responds, oh yeah, what I've seen a lot of people saying with YouTube videos is it was their first trip and their current trip. They mushed it together as one thing to just start their first leg of travel. And so the words I've highlighted there are one thing to just start. And what I think is quite important to bear in mind here is that they had so little material filmed that even though they were 2 months into their trip, they kind of had to mush together aspects that had taken place prior to the actual summer epic, the actual van life part of it. They were actually taking certain other things and putting it into that. And so one kind of gets a sense that there was a bit of a failure to launch for Nomadic Static, that they were struggling to get it going. And maybe, there's a saying that perfect is the enemy of good. Sometimes you try to do something so well that you end up not doing it or postponing it or not really getting the right sort of start. So I do think that Brian and Gabby found the social media and the YouTube aspect quite challenging. Trying to set up your social media as a business to make money is very slow going initially. It can be frustrating, daunting, stressful, expensive, and there can be serious strategic and creative differences. Personally, I feel that they should have paced their social media output better and probably should have gotten the blog ready or up and running at least before they left New York on July the 2nd. And that brings us to the next question from the reporter. She says, and so I guess the last time you saw or talked to Gabby was before they left. Meaning, I guess, either July 2nd or before they left Florida. And then Cassie says, other than FaceTime, yeah. Like the day before they left, they came over and helped me with the kids because I had pest control coming in. Now, she could talk about the last time that she actually spoke to them. It's unfortunate that the reporter says before they left. It's unfortunate that she didn't just leave it as, when was the last time you spoke to Gabby? And then she may have spoken about FaceTiming them while they were on this trip. That would have been more valuable. Unfortunately, Cassie grabs onto the whole thing of before they left and then talks about them both coming over, helping them with the kids because I had pest control coming in, and I've highlighted that. Cassie volunteers these words. She doesn't necessarily need to include this detail in her statement, but think of those words, pest control. Think of whether that might be something Brian needs to think about right now in terms of bugs, etc., wherever he is. And perhaps Cassie thinks subconsciously about this case as pest control. Who are the pests? Well, perhaps the media, perhaps social media. Perhaps she feels that the media and social media are pestering her family, or even that Brian is in a way in a way, a pest that needs to be kept under control or under a roof somewhere. It's just an interesting thing that she volunteers, of all the things that she could possibly volunteer. The next question is, did they talk to like family regularly on the trip? And Cassie then responds, yeah, that sort of thing, yeah. Next question, and I guess if you're just kind of as his sister, what is the oddest thing to you about all this? If you had to, and then the reporter stops there. Some of the questions are quite garbled, but what she's really getting at here is, what's the oddest thing about everything that has happened? And Cassie's response is that I haven't been able to talk to him. I wish I could talk to him. So that is how that question came up. And in Banfield's show, she sort of wants to know, what question led to this answer. Well, that is the question. The oddest thing about all this. Now, Cassie answering that I haven't been able to talk to him would have been odd, except, well, hasn't she? Hasn't she been able to talk to him? Hasn't she been able to see him since he returned and before he left again? Right? And it would be very odd if it were true, if Brian hadn't spoken to Cassie but had spoken to other family members. The fact that he did speak to her and she denied it here on camera is also very odd.
It was tough to get any more obvious than that.
Then the next question from the reporter is, he just doesn't want to say anything to anyone. It's sort of a leading question. Cassie responds, I know that it's all because the lawyer's advising them not to say anything. And so, what Cassie's implying here is that the lawyers are advising them, which is theoretically Chris and Roberta, that is Brian's parents, but also possibly also referring to Brian, that he shouldn't say anything either. She doesn't include herself in this, though. She doesn't include herself being advised not to say anything. And one does wonder what the status was. Had anyone spoken to her and said, don't speak to the media? Or was she given the green light to speak to the media? One wonders what the answer is. So one does wonder, was she not advised not to say anything? Within the contrivance of possibly pretending not to have contact with Brian, it makes sense to speak in these terms. Cassie also doesn't get her tenses wrong, but that doesn't mean the transcript is plain sailing. The next question is, in the meantime, it seems like the world's searching for Gabby, and they're just all in the house, and you're trying to cooperate as best as you can. It's quite an interesting question. The world is searching for Gabby, and they're just all in the house. One wonders if that's not analogous to Brian in a way. Is he in a house somewhere? Are they all in a house somewhere? And Cassie then makes quite an interesting, her response is quite interesting again to this very open question. It's even not really a question. The reporter says something about the world is searching for Gabby, and they're a reference to her parents. They're just all in the house. And she seems to see it as a potential snipe or a potential criticism of cooperation, hers and her family's. And so she responds saying, I've cooperated every way that I can. I wish I had information, or I would give more. This is all I have. She says, this is all I have I gave to the police. And I wonder whether this is all I have is a reference to Brian. He's my brother. He's all I have. Naturally, I'm going to look after him. What do you guys think? The next question is something that I've definitely emphasized. Have you talked to Gabby's family? And you would imagine that if this is her sister-in-law almost, her sister-in-law has virtually lived with her own parents for 2 years. She's basically like family, right? It's her brother's fiancée. It's kind of someone who describes herself as Aunt Gabby to Cassie's children, right? So has she talked to Gabby's family? And the answer should be yes, because she's concerned. And instead she says, no one's reached out to me, and I don't know if it's appropriate for me to reach out to them with everything that's going on. Why wouldn't it be appropriate? And I think that word "appropriate" is a legal term. It's a word perhaps used by a lawyer, and perhaps a lawyer said to her, "It's not going to be appropriate to do this," right? And that then puts into perspective her comment earlier about being advised by a lawyer not to say anything, which she puts onto them, but doesn't it apply to her as well? So once again, another fantastic question and another highly problematic answer. Gabby's played with your kids, lived with your folks for 2 years, engaged your brother, and you don't know if it's appropriate to contact her parents to find out what's going on, to find out if she's safe. You know, have you tried to contact Gabby? Not to be nasty, but I find it troubling. I find it more than troubling. Next question. What would you say to her family just so they know that you're, that, and she didn't answer the question, just so that they know that you're, and I guess she's trying to say concerned or something like that. Cassie responds, "Oh, we want her back safe too. It's obvious she's great. She's cute. She loves my kids. They've done one together." Not quite sure what that means. Next question. And just as a mom yourself, I guess you probably can't even imagine what she's cut off. Cassie responds, that's what, obviously the big thing as a parent, you want to protect your kids. And I've highlighted that as well and underlined it. It's another great open-ended question. And Cassie gravitates to exactly the sort of psychology we'd expect from a mother and a much older sister. And that is protection, right? The next question is, did the police say anything else about ? Cassie seems to interrupt there again, says, "No, I only had the initial questions and I haven't been contacted again. And whenever they want to contact me again, I'm here waiting. They have my number." So Cassie doesn't seem to be concerned about Brian's mental health or Gabby's whereabouts within the context of the timeline before Gabby was found. So it appears that she was going to play a passive role and only respond when the police called her. She's not going to be calling them for information. Is she? Is she going to be calling them, for example, about Gabby? ? Next question. Did you know that the van was back and your ? Cassie Laundrie, no. Oh, you didn't know that the van was back? Because her lawyer said that Brian stopped at Cassie's house first before he went to his parents. You didn't know the van was back even though Brian was back. So it's interesting that Cassie basically interrupts the reporter on this question. And one wonders, did she know? Did she know the van was back? Did she know Brian was back? Next question. So you didn't know that he came back without the ? Now I'm not quite sure what that's a reference to. Without the what? Without Gabby, well then wouldn't be the. Anyway, Cassie responds, "I assumed he flew back because that's what he did when he is..." Actually, I don't want to say that. So it almost seems as though she's saying here that she didn't see the van and so she assumed he flew back. I actually get the sense she's trying to sort of say that for the second time that he came back and then feels that she's overstepped her mark. I could be wrong. But this also shows that she probably had contact with him when he did fly back. But who knows? Another interruption and another instance of perhaps being economical with the truth. Here Cassie backtracks and I think asks the reporter not to include the snippet of Brian flying back in the segment, and so it isn't. Okay, so we almost finished. Next question. The questioner, the reporter says, no problem. Cassie says, I think that's more police stuff, meaning, stuff I can't talk about. Next question from the reporter. Okay, but is it like out of his behavior to go on a trip with her and then just leave her somewhere? Like, has anything like this ever? Cassie responds, no. No. Nothing like this has ever happened before. And that's quite important to establish if you can trust Cassie on this point. She's saying, that he's quite a loyal guy, that he is committed to Gabby. So what has happened here? In other words, Brian doesn't run away. Brian doesn't abandon Gabby. Well, except he has. He is. So what's so exceptional here? I think what had to have been most traumatic with her was the realization that the engagement was off. Now, I did pay attention to the Moab incident. He describes her as his fiancée to the Moab cops, and she describes him as her fiancé. And you get the sense that she doesn't want to be alone, or she can't be alone. That's something else Ashley Banfield highlighted in her recent video. I'll put a link to that in the description. But I think something traumatic must have happened. And, you know, for something like this never to have happened before, something traumatic must have happened. And I wonder whether that wasn't a realization from one of them that the relationship would soon be over. And so with his family watching and social media jeering, that had to be pretty devastating for Brian. You know, what I mean is, before he disappeared, before Gabby died, you might have had a situation of Brian perceiving the sense that his family's watching him going through a breakup, right? They're trying to make sure that his relationship survives, but it's not. And then there's also social media that are jeering at him. Perhaps a lot of that stuff's been deleted, but you know, perhaps he's being jeered at on YouTube or criticized by certain people. And that's got to be devastating if you kind of having a breakup that others are witnessing somehow, and it's coming back to you in that way. And then the next question, but I'm saying he doesn't really have, does he have like the personality to where he would? Cassie responds, no. He always does the right thing. Like in the body cam, he cooperates with the police, and he's a wonderful uncle. He's always been there when I need him. He's been there every time Gabby needed him. The thing that is easy to miss here is she's describing her relationship with him as well. She's describing his relationship with Cassie as well. So on the one hand, he's saying he's been there for Gabby all the time, whenever Gabby needed him. On the other hand, she's saying he's a wonderful uncle to her own children, and that he's always been there when I need him. And so is she going to be there when he needs her? What do you think the answer is to that? So why doesn't Brian do the right thing here? Why doesn't he hand himself in? Why has all of this happened? Because he's emotionally compromised. He's lost his world. That's what I think. Next question. So when you saw the video, did it just look like a spat to you, or did it look like your brother was, or you know what I mean? Like, does it just, I don't know, it's very garbled, some of these questions, but Cassie responds, it looks typical of both of them, that they, whenever they fight, they would take a little break and come back and be fine, because that's what you do in a couple, sit there in the mountains together. Freudian slip? Is Brian somewhere in the mountains? Next question. Anything else you want to say, just from your perspective, or just about the whole situation? Like you said, you've been watching it unravel day by day, and more attention is going on, and it seems like the whole world's wondering where she is. And Cassie responds, I don't think so. Obviously, we want her back just as bad as everybody else. I wish I could help and be the person to do that. I don't know. I'm sure Cassie wants to be the person to be that, to be helpful. But look at what she chooses, how she chooses to respond to the interview. Anything else you want to say? Answer, I don't. Repeat it 3 times. And in the context of saying something, and then also, I wish I could help, isn't she? Hasn't she? The second half of the question is the whole world's wondering where she is, meaning Gabby. Indirectly, Cassie responds to this indirect question, are you wondering where she is, by saying, I don't. Earlier, she referenced the word unaware. That is what this is all about, a game of cat and mouse, awareness and unawareness, remembering and forgetting, and trying to stay a few steps ahead. So far, so good for the Laundrie family, but how much longer will Brian outplay, outwit, and outlast the hounds that are after him? Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.